Welcome, Fred, to the UC MBA and Executive Education Masterclass series. It's nice to have Fred in with us today, and we're going to be discussing revenue management and why this is such a radical concept for accountants.
Radical, a bit weird. I mean, I've studied it kind of all my career, but what's new is new and what's familiar is familiar. So it's great to be here. I am Fred, a senior lecturer from the University of Auckland. For the Good Karma, I have the joy of teaching third years and postgrad students.
Oh. So what got you into revenue management? Why did you go outside the mold of our traditional accounting focus on cost?
Oh, well, I mean, traditional to me was a bit weird because coming into the University of Auckland, this has been an offering, the study of revenue management alongside cost management from my undergraduate. So here I was in the undergraduate thinking, oh, stunning. So in addition to financial accounting, auditing, we also think about how do we study revenues and value generation in an organization and go out there and share it with accountants and work interdisciplinary and so on.
Yeah.
Turns out, not the case, kind of unique at the University of Auckland.
Yeah.
So carrying that ball, I did my honors project in this area, found traction in that, did a PhD in the area, and here I am now.
And following on for your PhD, I heard the Institute of Management Accountants actually got interested in your framework. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was during the pandemic, and people were looking for new projects, new ideas. Yeah. There was a new profitability analytics center for excellence that was set up. That was looking for an angle to say, rather than just studying cost accounting endlessly, what can we do to study revenue and value generation? So they caught wind of us, so they're from the US, and caught wind of us at the University of Auckland that we have been teaching this course for 15, 20 years by now. And I thought, let's see what there is for it. So we worked with them. They were very amazing, very supportive to take these ideas, sculpt them, and firstly put out what they call a Statement of Management Accounting, which they call their flagship or signature series of leading-edge management accounting practices. Me being the sort of shy wallflower that I typically am, maybe you don't believe that, I used to be, was thinking, how is my idea revolutionary and grand? Yeah. But it's been very well received as an alternative to traditional cost thinking. So that Statement of Management Accounting then led to a series of other presentations at universities with my co-authors on this, Julie Harrison, Paul Rouse, both at the University of Auckland, and Monty, the IMA and PACE representative, which then led to an IMA presentation on this topic, and now here, this masterclass series.
So can you go back and tell us a little bit about where it all started? You know, because cost is so inground in us, going all the way back to our traditional, return on investment, DuPont kind of models.
Yeah.
Where does sales kind of fit in, and why wasn't it picked up earlier?
Well, I'm only 36, so I can't really speak for the way back when machine. But one of our co-authors on the project, Monty, a student of accounting history, as he always sells himself as, did a lot of work in and around the DuPont model. Yeah. So that is the managerial model started at DuPont, which breaks down a company's overall profit, its return on investment, in a couple of elements. Yeah. So in our Statement of Management Accounting, they put that in as a framework, a starting point to describe where did this, as you say, cost focus come from. So let me mentally imagine what the framework looks like. So we are looking at return on investment, which on a good day is defined as profit divided by your total assets. Yeah. That bifurcates or splits off into profit divided by sales, which is your profit margin. Yeah. And then you have sales divided by your total assets, which is your return on investment. Okay. The model then politely ignores sales because of the power of algebra. The numerator on one cancels out the denominator on another. So we're only interested in the profit angle and the investment angle.
Yeah, sales just gets left out in a little corner because it's cancelled because it's on both sides.
Cancelled because on both sides, and kind of the discipline of other areas. There's a literal business function called sales, marketing, and so on.
And so it hasn't been seen as part of accounting because of maybe some historical reasons.
Perhaps for territorial reasons, perhaps for comfort, perhaps because accounting has historically been grounded around record keeping and capture of what we formally see.
Yeah.
So breaking that down, we then typically see the DuPont being analyzed in terms of cost control, investment decisions, the asset management, and so on.
Yeah.
Leaving what Monty had always said, poor orphan Annie, sales, very important, but nobody pays attention to it.
Or we'll leave it to somebody else.
Or we'll leave it to somebody else
because it's not part of our
that's
core.
their field.
Because all those assets and liabilities and things, they're all transactions that we see and we calculate, and it becomes a really big part of our statements, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, when you look at a financial statement, you see sales on one line, don't you?
You do. You do.
Nobody breaks that down. It's
Nope.
a one line of sales revenue, and then you have these 50 other lines.
Or if you're very lucky, the statement of cash flows, we have several, three
Or you might
cash
get
flow
three.
inputs.
But everything else is transactional, covered in balance sheets. Income statements are all the cost angles, isn't it?
Exactly. So we do ourselves no real favors in the financial accounting arm.
Yeah.
I mean, there are revenue recognition standards and all of that.
Yeah.
But as you say, just visualize the income statement, one line for revenue.
99% is focused on the cost. Even if you go into the notes, most of the notes are about the cost side.
Yeah.
We've got this little revenue, and revenue is quite important, isn't it?
Yes. So talking to organizations, there's a strange duality about it in that organizations want to generate value. We want to earn profit. We want to maximize value for shareholders.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to listening to those day-to-day decisions, we often see these huge stopgaps from accountants of out of budget, no money for it. What is the cost implication of it?
Yeah.
Rather than perhaps the accountant, I'm biased, I think of a management accountant as a helper and enabler to think about what can we do to assist value. Marketing, what do you need? What is your business model and things like that.
And what are your projections? Where are your revenue numbers going that need to be supported through the cost model and actually connecting them?
And so the idea here is trained as a management accountant, trained to teach management accounting, we want to help other business functions. And so it's so terribly, such a kick to the teeth whenever you talk about accountants in an organization, you know, the eyes roll and they go, accounting, what are they going to do for us? So I think what I like that's taken in this work's angle is how can we support others? And part of that is coming in and around the idea of understanding what other functions do.
Yeah.
Okay, there is a sales department, there is a marketing department, there is in a lot of industries a literally named revenue management department.
Yeah.
And so the goal of this work here, just bringing it back, is the idea that revenue management well established across other departments. What can we as accountants do to listen, support better? And part of that is, yes, a lot of techniques, which the IMA have been very interested in.
Yeah.
But from what I see, a lot of it is just finding common ground, common language to understand what's going on.
So you found some levers that you kind of have built into the new ROI system that show how sales actually come about. Can you kind of talk to us about those levers?
So we call them levers because in earlier work in the hospitality industry, they called them levers. And research is nothing about standing upon the shoulders of giants and moving forward with that.
So a lot of this is coming from another discipline or a practice location where it was a commonly used term.
Absolutely.
And then how do we use that to explain these concepts?
Absolutely. So honoring the past, we think about revenue management historically in the airline industry, expanding to the hotel, car rental industries, and then on, what are the implications elsewhere.
Can you tell us briefly why were those the key industries where revenue management was kind of targeted earlier than maybe others?
Sure, absolutely. So the background for where revenue management exists, there are three principles in and around it. Firstly, you have a lot of fixed assets. Imagine an airplane. The airplane was well invested in, well maintained, and so on, and it has only so many seats. And you want to make sure you maximize the revenue from each of those seats per plane and so on. There is varying demand. If demand is predictable, there is no issue. You say, we know exactly 90 customers are going to come in, and so we'll just take the best 45 of them.
Yeah.
But when things vary, you need to analyze where that goes. And then lastly, it's called perishable assets. And that's the idea that after a certain point in time, the capacity has no value. The example that we always talk about, when the plane leaves, you cannot sell an empty seat on the plane.
No,
it has
we
already
can't
gone.
Get somebody on the plane.
As much as maybe we could try. When the hotel night is gone, you cannot sell them the bed there. So those were the three settings in which revenue management researchers actively began their thinking. So that's why we see in hotels and airlines.
Yeah.
That has since evolved, firstly in terms of the work in and around restaurants, movie theaters, golf courses. Expanding that thinking lets us then theorize what happens to our classic revenue management practices from airlines and hotels when we go into these other industries. So taking on that theme about expansion, we get this idea that revenue management, very important across organizations. Yeah. How can we systematically see it evolve in different organizations? And so therefore that led to the very origin of my PhD work, which is, well, what does revenue management look like when we look across different industries?
Yeah. So it's kind of mapping out that bigger picture that kind of gives you even more insights then into what revenue management could be. So what are these four levers that these organizations can pull?
So after all of that, we discovered there are four levers that you pull.
Yeah.
And they are pricing basis. So loosely, that is thinking about, are you pricing based on value to the customer in the organization rather than what it costs you? Yeah. Second of these things is inventory allocation. So an organization has a set amount of inventory or a set amount of capacity, but maybe a very big, very small amount of demand. Yeah. What are we going to do to maximize that inventory's value, that capacity's value? Yeah. So those are the two traditional levers. When we expand to other industries, cost thinking, design becomes very important. So this leads to lever 3, product configuration, with the goal in mind of trying to accommodate pricing to different customers and maximizing the value of inventory to a varied market. How can you design your products in a cost-effective way to support that?
So it's about segmenting.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
So segmenting at a reasonable cost,
yeah.
Making sure it also does the job.
So different kinds of customers that hotels want to attract can be segmented into
Exactly.
different price points and
corporate
cost
customers,
points.
transient customers, low-value customers, high values,
Yeah.
so on. And then the last one, I always feel for this fourth one because I always talk excitedly and animatedly about the other three, then lose a bit of steam. The fourth one is duration control. Duration referring to time, to managing the process it takes to look after someone, and trying to get that as stable as possible.
Yeah.
And so with that one, you're trying to understand what causes different behaviors. The more you can think about external, so what customers are affecting that, and therefore how you can guide their behavior, rather than just fighting fires, the better that action is.
So let's talk through some examples of what these might look like. And I know we've done some studies in the past looking at hotels, and you've done other studies looking at lots of other industries. What are some kind of typical examples that can help people get an idea of how they could use these four levers in their business?
Yeah. So these levers we have here, I've mentioned, are one of the roles they play is in and around communication.
Yeah.
So taking each of these levers, applying them to, we've had a study on small hotels.
Yeah.
My colleagues Julie and Paul have had studies on diagnosis-related groups, costing, how much it costs to treat
So
the
this is for
customer.
hospitals?
For hospitals
Oh.
and out-of-hospital care.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so part of that is a language, and is saying that in each of these 4 spheres, there are objectives which may be others, whether it's sales or marketers, or in the case of a small hotel, the one person
Yes.
looks after it, or in the medical sense, doctors and all that.
Yeah.
So some of the work that we did looks at how each of these 4 levers might become very important. Okay. So, for example, in the work that we had with our honors student,
Yeah.
that was looking at, we've had this idea that revenue management exists in that hotel sphere, traditionally.
Yeah.
But what does it look like when we go to a small hotel? And the kicker to that was small hotels work with, are they OBIs, online booking intermediaries,
yes,
like Booking.com, Expedia, and all that.
The big boys in the
big
hoteliers
boys with the poor,
with the very small little hotels.
poor little hotels around what it looks like. And so what was very cool there was we think about revenue generation, value generation, when they're working with these relationships.
Yeah.
So in those interviews, our student then said, all right, so what's your relationship with them like? What are your concerns and all that? And what we were able to do was take each of these 4 levers, pricing basis, how do you price? Capacity allocation, your hotel rooms, get the most value from them. Product configuration, think about how you design special offers. Duration control, make sure customers arrive and stay on time. How each of those things apply with their relationship with Booking.com, Expedia, all these OBIs. And think about what does it mean for their decision making to make a little bit of a guidebook that applies, whether it's literally within the accountant sphere, but in a small hotel, it's everywhere.
It's going to be owner management sphere, but they're playing all the roles really, aren't they? At these small businesses, how do we kind of enable people to make good decisions with information that they have and give them good processes?
Yeah, which then leads into how can the accountant be better, or if we take a looser definition, what is the financial KPI information which would help small hotels understand that relationship?
Yeah.
So that was one example very close to home to the revenue management field.
Yeah.
The other example, which I was so pleased when Julie and Paul were talking about this within that perspective of revenue management, is the idea that we're looking at managing client-patient care as it arises outside of a hospital setting.
So this is more outpatient. At their homes or at
rehabilitation, older people and aspects like that.
Yeah.
And so in those settings, it becomes paying attention to customer needs. So can the older person bathe themselves? Can they walk by themselves? And things like that. And so where that revenue management, that accounting angle came in for that, is they wanted to say, how much would it cost to fund a typical person within certain types of categories? And so with that, they found that link to revenue management's conceptualization around what are different customer needs, therefore what are the resources that are involved in it to support that. And so when they were thinking about this from that revenue management lens, it's the idea that, well, some of these levers don't apply. You can't say this older person is rich, so we'll charge them more. Or we can't say that...
our good old segmentation model.
The segmentation model. We can't say we only have a certain number of hours. Let's only help the very rich people.
Because we'll make the most money and get the most revenue. We can't do that.
Not what the healthcare sector is about. So then it became a management of those other levers. So these were product configuration. How can you support different customer needs at lower cost? And duration control, thinking about differences in customer behavior and how we manage that. And so applying this lens, they discovered, or they were seeking out, what are different categories of customers. They are very unsexily labeled A through J. But I guess if you see your patient profile and you see a highly disabled, not a very good look.
No.
Whereas item D,
Yes.
fine, no problem. And it's that idea about bringing in that customer's need. What are the aspects they value? Lets us figure out the resources involved to then lay on that accounting focus around what has it cost a typical customer D, what's it cost a typical customer A, which has led to all kinds of cool management implications.
So if you kind of had a message for accountants who are, interested in broadening their skill set to be, able to better help management, what kind of things should they be looking at? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we want to think about here is that accounting, I would bravely say, lives or dies in how useful its information is.
Yeah.
You produce a report, you give it to management, they ignore it. Why have you done all that
No
work?
value.
You produce a report, you give it to management, they say, I don't believe this, we'll work on our own information. No value. So it's always that theme that we had around this work from its origins and thinking about what has resonated with people is in and around, as an accountant, what manner of information would decision makers find helpful, but not from that, yes, man, your project's going to be amazing, but landing some structure on top of it.
So giving them some valuable feedback that they wouldn't have got otherwise, that they believe, and that helps them make decisions.
Absolutely. So thinking about that, applying something like a revenue management framework gives you 4 points of discussion. How are we setting our prices? What information would you find helpful there? Same for how are we managing our inventory. Same for how are we designing our products and controlling that. And our processes, our duration, and how we control that.
So these could just be 4 things that accountants think of when they're helping the managers that they work for to kind of ask questions about how we can assist in information in areas that, when you put together, actually have a big impact.
Absolutely, absolutely. 4 talking points, 4 discussion points, which a lot of others would find resonant. I guess one of the metaphors for a management accountant that my colleague Paul had always discussed, which I'm so enchanted by, which is why I bring it up now, is the idea that the accountant in an organization serves as a conductor. So a conductor in an orchestra, maybe they don't literally stand up and receive the ovation of people.
But they're down below.
The down below, the
orchestrating.
first violinist and all that. But the idea here is that in their accounting sense, they have an oversight and a record of everything that goes on in the organization that's material.
Yeah, they see everything. They've got a big view, don't they?
And so just like a conductor, they can control the pacing, they can control attention, they can see what is great and what's poor in an organization, but they don't do the functions. The conductor trusts the violinist, they trust the percussion section, and they work to coordinate everything. So that metaphor of the accountant, the management accountant as the conductor, I think applies here.
Yeah.
We want to understand revenue generation, value generation, how it fits into different disciplinary areas, how it coordinates to improve the organization as a whole. How can we conduct? And thinking about these 4 levers, pricing basis, inventory allocation, product configuration, duration control, gives us that point of discussion.
So those are our core tools for enabling conduction to kind of take place, aren't they? It's hard to conduct if you don't have some focus, and these are 4 potentially good focus areas.
That's right. And from what we've seen, highly resonant across different organizations, but also very flexible to understand different organizations' needs.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Fred, for joining us on this masterclass. It's great to have you here, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here.
Thank you.